Have a new Android box in for testing today. It's the Tanix TX3, brand new model out, and this is based on the S905W chipset. Just have a quick look at what's included. There's a 5V 2A adapter that will come in your own particular region. I'm looking at the UK one. We have a standard HDMI cable, not gold plated on this. The remote is pretty standard, but it's an improvement over the previous older ones, but it's not the programmable ones that you can get with some of them. This takes two AAA batteries, they're not included, and we'll look at the user manual briefly. It's just a generic guide. It's going to be of some use if you've never used an Android box before. There's nothing much particularly detailed there apart from a troubleshooting section. Gets the job done. Now on the specs with this, it's actually pretty decent. This new chipset, the S905W, is slightly different from the X, but only in one area. It can play 4K at 30 instead of 60 frames per second compared to the S905X. So that's the only real difference. On the back, we have the AV out, optical, LAN, HDMI, and the power input. And then moving around to the side, two USB 2 ports, and there is the micro SD slot if you wish to expand the storage. Front panel is the infrared connector there, and there's an LCD display which I will show you shortly. Nothing else anywhere else. Texturing is okay, you have a glossy section and a matte part. Minimalistic, looks alright, and there's a reset button on the left here, and there's the 4 rubber pads as well. And this is the LCD, or rather LED display. You can see it shows you the Wi-Fi there. It's not too bright, I find it pretty good. Useful to show you the time. Going into the main menu system, you can see quite a familiar one here with an animation when you move between them. You have a memory recycle as well included, and some pre-configured ones that you can't change. What you can do though is go into the apps and specify which ones you want on the bottom part of the section. You can have up to 9 apps showing there, so you can customize that as I've just done here. Works well enough, pretty simple. The TV Center, we'll get onto that shortly. Just have a quick look at some of the apps, not too many included. They put Netflix in there, Mobdro. You can also uninstall them from that menu system. I prefer to have a box without too much in it, too many apps. Onto the TV Center, it's just Kodi 17 with their own skin on it, and they have some streams already preloaded into this. That's for the video as well as the music add-ons. It's not as loaded as I've seen, but it's enough to get you going. Some of these streams don't work, so you'll have to go in there and test them. Every Android box I've ever had a few streams which didn't. So what I would suggest doing is going into the add-ons section for the update. I'm going to pick the English one here, and it will just pull down the later versions, the most recent versions off the internet. Give that a few minutes to run, and you should see your streams have been updated, such as they have here. There are quite a few guides online for doing different configurations for Kodi. There's quite a lot you can actually do with this. Now, just going into the settings, you can see we have an additional menu layer that comes up rather than just pulling out the side menu. Personally, I would prefer this not to be here, because the side menu, which I will just show you now, has come up. That's just much easier to change the settings there, so I'm not sure why they've done that. That's something I don't particularly like myself. But you do have the HDR options. You can also have a navigation bar, so you can bring that up, which is quite useful, particularly if you've got an Air mouse or one of those wireless keyboards with a touchpad. And you can also adjust the power key definition to shut down or stand by. Nothing too much exciting in here. This is a basic Android box. I did check for some system updates, and there wasn't any available at the time of the review, and that can vary, but 9 out of 10 I would say most of these boxes don't get updated. Now, if you go into the more settings, it just takes you into the standard Android settings, so you actually have quite a few layers of settings. So I personally would have just removed the top one that they included. You probably won't have to go into that very often. Now on the navigation bar, you can see you can change the volume, switch between apps, and also dismiss them. Take a screenshot, and you can also turn it off from that as well. So it's really going to be useful if you have an Air mouse. You can also push and hold the power button, will give you a choice between power off and restart. Now fortunately, if you do dismiss the navigation bar, you can just flip up and bring it back again, Again, with the Air Mouse, that's going to be much more useful than it is with the digital one that's included, so I'd recommend getting one of those. As far as YouTube goes, no problems with the playback, but it's 720p for some reason. Some of the slightly higher priced boxes I've looked at will offer full HD. At the minute this one's just 720p, still looks okay, but that's just one issue to note. On to Geekbench 4, and the result was just around 1400, which is pretty similar to the S905X boxes I've looked at. There's a bit of margin of error with this testing, but it's up there with them. And now I'm just running the Bonzai Benchmark, which I use to test the 3D, just to give you an idea. And it got just over the 21 frames per second. So you can go back and compare this to the other boxes that I've looked at, just under 1500 points. Also did well on the Wi-Fi too, didn't have any issues with that. Good download speeds and upload. Also held the signal quite well. Also have DLNA and AirPlayer included as well. You also have the Mirrorcast if you wish. If you're having any problems getting blocked from sites, you can also use VPN. There's a few of those around, free ones. That's just a heads up on that side of things. And Mobdro is included. Quite a few streams on that. That's worth checking out. That's one of the few apps that they have included on this. So a quick summary on the TX3. Overall, pretty good little box. Have to say, if it's a choice between this and the TX2, which I reviewed in the summer, I would probably go for this, even though it's just slightly more expensive, because the performance of the chipset is definitely a little bit better than the TX2. Not that there was anything wrong with that, but you just notice it feels a bit faster. Moving between apps and switching between apps is quicker. That's partly down to the fact that you have a slightly faster processor in there, and it's also it's just a better value box overall. I think I didn't have any major issues, just a couple of points really. Don't get Bluetooth. The extra layer on the settings, I wasn't particularly keen about that, and the standard remote, perhaps would have preferred the programmable one. But overall, pretty good little box, particularly at the price point. We're still in a budget segment, something slightly more expensive than some of the super budget boxes, and I personally think it's worth paying just a little bit extra. 3D performance is okay. If you're looking for a gaming box, really you want to spend a little bit more up to the mid-range ones. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, do leave them below, and I'll catch up with you in my next video review.